Many teenagers are as concerned as their parents with the public's conception of today's youth. This group is our ideal of the proper school attire and social behaviors of the Hicksville Junior High student.
You're watching an educational film, 1957, teaching students what to wear in school. I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker, and I was raised in East Meadow, Levittown, and I was a sophomore in high school in 1957, and that film was made in Hicksville, Long Island, the next town over. So I thought it would be fun, fascinating, provocative to look at the dress codes at that time. Why do I find that so interesting? In part because people at that time, the leadership, felt that if you controlled the dress, if you controlled the look, you could control us, the teenagers, the baby boomer teenagers. Well, let's look at what happened. First of all, why did they, the older people, the parents, the school leaders, the church leaders, think that they needed to control us? Well, that's a question we're going to put aside for now, but it really interests me. And did it work? Did the dress codes work? Well, first of all, I thought we'd look at clothing. Look at what was going on at that time. Look at us baby boomers as teenagers in 1957. Girls were wearing crinolines. They wore Peter Pan tops. They wore penny loafers. I couldn't afford penny loafers, but I remember kids having penny loafers, and they took out the pennies and they put quarters, because we had money back then. They put quarters in their shoes. Girls had these pop-up bead necklaces. Let me just tell you, the girl would come up to you and she would go, and just that sound, and she was popping the necklace, very exciting. Girls wore these thick belts that accentuated their waists. And if you had a girlfriend, she would wear your ring, or she would be pinned. And there were pins on the left side and pins on the right side. One said virgin, one said not. I can't remember which was which, maybe you can. And lastly, girls wore these tight sweaters. That was permissible even in school, as long as they weren't too tight. They were unbelievably exciting at the time to teenage boys like me. Now, what do boys wear? Boys wore their father's clothing. It's the same. A suit jacket, a shirt, short hair. Now, us teenagers were able to buy all that stuff because we had money. All kinds of summer jobs, allowances from our parents, particularly the new middle class. We had money, and what were we buying? Records and clothes. Now, music separated us from our parents and from the school, but so did clothing. Clothing, you could either be part of a group by wear the same clothes they wore, a lot of girls did that, or you could wear individual clothes, your own individual style that kind of stated who you were, kind of like having a car, which was your car, said who you were. Having clothing said who you were. School didn't like that. Now, let me just say before I go on, I was no fashion statement. I did not wear clothing to make a statement about myself. In fact, I used clothing to try to become anonymous. I wore exactly what everybody else wore, trying not to stand out. And before I talk about how they restricted clothing, I just want to say one more thing about girls' clothing. They were pedal pushers. I mean, they were so sexy. You could only wear those on the weekend. You could not wear pedal pushers to school. So now I'd like to look at the school rules. There were a lot of them. Okay, hemline length. You had to be below the knee. Now in Catholic schools, they really measured this when you came to school. How do I know that? Because I had a Catholic girlfriend, and she would have these pins on her skirt where when she came out of school, she pinned up her hemline above her knee. And when she went to school, she pinned her hemline below her knee. Hairstyles. There was a proper hairstyle, and there was a not proper hairstyle. And length. Don't cut your hair too short. It has to flow down if you're a girl. Cut your hair short if you're a guy. Nothing longer. That wasn't even in our thinking. No dungarees. Now, dungarees were a big style at the time, in part because Marilyn Monroe wore them. And when Marilyn wore dungarees, a lot of girls said, wow, I'm wearing dungarees. Dungarees, no in school. And of course, no leather jacket. Leather jacket meant troublemaker, juvenile delinquent. No leather jackets. Now, what happened if you didn't follow these rules? Well, first, you got disciplined. You got sent to the principal's office, and you had to sit in the principal's office and say you weren't going to dress like that again. 2, you kind of got publicly humiliated. The school shamed you for wearing those clothes. Of course, other kids loved it. And worst of all, call your parents. We're going to call your parents. We're going to tell them what you wore to school. And here's what the school officials said about dress code, why they did it. This is what they said. 1, it improved learning. I guess kids didn't concentrate on each other as much, was their thinking. It enhanced safety for girls. 3, less focus on our looks, as though teenagers are not going to focus on their looks if they're wearing these clothes. Boy, was that not true. And if you think about it, like we thought about it, the parents and the teachers were becoming disciplinarians. They were going to be disciplinarians. Why did parents want the teachers to become disciplinarians? Mostly because the parents could not control us. The parents put so many restrictions on kids that it just wasn't working. So they said to the school, you put restrictions on kids, and I'm going to show you a bit of an educational film where the teacher is, first of all, a disciplinarian.
What's this? What kind of behavior do you call this? Wait a minute, you stay where you are. This is the kind of behavior I might have expected of you. All I do is leave the room for a few minutes, and what do I find? Confusion, disorder. And you, what were you doing?
I was just going...
Going to what? Throw the eraser, I suppose. It's a good thing I caught you. I'll make an example out of you.
But I...
That's enough out of you. Leave this room and report to the principal's office immediately. 2 detentions. 3 detentions.
Boy, is that not working. Not helping education, not letting kids kind of express themselves, and trying to use clothing as a disciplinary tool. Now, the idea of clothing and style and discipline is not new. In the 1920s, corsets were a requirement for girls and hats for boys. In the 1930s, they allowed knee socks instead of stockings. In the 1940s, everybody had to wear Mary Jane shoes, and for boys, it was jackets and sweaters. In the 1950s, girls had to have high necklines. No showing anything here. Of course, by the end of the 1960s, this dress code thing was collapsing. And I think a student took a case to the Supreme Court about wearing an armband. Armbands were making a statement against the Vietnam War, black armbands. And the student won. So for me, looking at this is a lot of fun, and I hope it is for you as well. But there's a real message here, because some of you, my commentators, my subscribers, talk about how wonderful the 1950s was, that we should go back to the 1950s. And I just want to say it didn't work. It never works. The idea of trying to control students' dress. Now, I think it's gone too far, maybe. My opinion, I'm not sure about that. But I know there's a good case to be made. But the idea that you would control hairstyle, hair length, dress style, really didn't adjust teenagers. The girls and boys who did it said that they had less sex when they did these surveys. They didn't. Later surveys showed. In fact, their behavior was the same, but they tried to fit in and follow school rules where other kids, the rebels, didn't. I wasn't a rebel in terms of clothing, but I supported those who were. I hope you've enjoyed this look at dress code. I'm going to run this again and another film also at the end of this for those of you to see just what was Hicksville High School in 1957 saying students should do, and clearly students didn't.
Many teenagers are as concerned as their parents with the public's conception of today's youth. These students are portraying what we consider bad taste in school attire and behavior. This student is wearing an ankle bracelet, dungarees, and dropped earrings. This student is wearing an extremely tight skirt and tight sweater. Open shirt, black jacket, dungarees are mentioned in the code as not proper school attire. This group is our ideal of the proper school attire and social behaviors of the Hicksville Junior High students.
The vast majority of behavior problems in the classroom involve minor breaches of discipline. These incidents frequently originate in the classroom situation itself. and are within the control of the teacher. Disciplinary problems in the classroom are symptoms of underlying weaknesses in total learning situation. Mr. Grimes, mathematics teacher, is displeased with the progress of his 9th grade class in mathematics.
You see what low grade you made on your weekly mathematics test? More than half of you failed. Most of those who passed just got by. Nobody had 100%. This is the poorest class I've had in a long, long time. Most of you have no foundation at all. Now, the trouble's with your attitude. You don't pay enough attention in class. You don't do enough work outside of it. You don't know what the word study means. You haven't the slightest idea. Don't you realize that mathematics is an important subject? I tell you right now that unless you get over your lazy habits and come up to the standards I've set for this class, many of you will have the pleasure of repeating this course next semester. Oh, what is it?
A note from Dr. Williams.
All right, that's all. I have to leave for a few minutes. Now, I want you to open your books and work out correct solutions of the problems you missed.
I can't make any sense out of this. I might as well quit. Gee, he never even took up this third problem. It's a jib.
He's got me scared to death. I'll just never pass this course. What's the use of taking this stuff anyway? I'm afraid to take my paper home.
He's just a sourpuss. The trouble is, you don't know what the word study means. You haven't the slightest idea. Oh, dry.
What's this? What kind of behavior do you call this? Wait a minute, you stay where you are. This is the kind of behavior I might have expected of you. All I do is leave the room for a few minutes, and what do I find? Confusion, disorder. And you, what were you doing?
I was just going...
Going to what? Throw the eraser, I suppose. It's a good thing I caught you. I'll make an example out of you.
But I...
That's enough out of you. Leave this room and report to the principal's office immediately. Well, hurry up. Don't take all day. Who did that? All right, since you think it's so funny, the whole class can stay in for 45 minutes this afternoon. Then you'll see how funny it is. Remember, the whole class is to report back here at 4 o'clock. Where were we?
I can't come. I got a newspaper route to do.
I got football practice. He can go fly a kite.
I have a piano lesson. I can't miss it.
I think he's horrible.
Stop that whispering.
Mr. Grimes did not have a happy time of the week.
Who dropped that book? All right, I'll wait till you're quiet. Many of you failed to hand in your homework yesterday. Now, you know that... What is this? Stop that noise. 2 detentions. 3 detentions. Leave this room and don't come back until you're ready to apologize to me.
Well, this is going to get us nowhere. Maybe we'd better go back to see if we can't find some of the causes of this undesirable learning situation. Just what was Mr. Grimes' purpose in making such statements as these?
This is the poorest class I've had in a long, long time.
This is hardly the way to win friends or influence people.
You don't know what the word study means. You haven't the slightest idea.
Might not be a bad idea to show them how.
I tell you right now that unless you get over your lazy habits and come up to the standards I have set for this class, many of you will have the pleasure of repeating this course next semester.
What kind of motivation is this? To what does it lead?
The trouble is, you don't know what the word study means. You haven't the slightest idea.
This reaction is the answer. It was the result of Mr. Grimes' provocative remarks. Now, take this.
It's a good thing I caught you. I'll make an example out of you.
Oh, come now, Mr. Grimes. By taking it out on the boy, aren't you covering up a symptom of your own deficiency?
Who did that?
Yes, who did? Some boy, probably. But the chances are it summarizes the feelings of the group. There is an unwritten code covering such situations. Why try to buck it?
All right, since you think it's so funny, the whole class can stay in for 45 minutes this afternoon.
Mass punishment is a dangerous weapon and doesn't work too well.
2 detentions. 3 detentions. Leave this room and don't come back until you're ready to apologize to me.
It's a long way to the end of the term. When will this end? Thus, what should have developed into a sequence of pleasant and valuable learning experiences had deteriorated into a series of disagreeable and injurious personal tensions. This is all wrong. Need any of these incidents have occurred at all? Suppose Mr. Grimes had tried another approach.
Most of you are disappointed in the low grades you made on this test. So am I. Nearly all of you had trouble with that last problem on ratio. Now, perhaps I didn't do a good job explaining ratio. Now, ratio is commonly used in everyday life. Mother uses it in the kitchen when she takes a recipe for a big cake and uses proportional amounts of ingredients to make a little cake, or vice versa. But let's suppose a recipe called for 8 cups of flour and 4 eggs. I wanted to make a cake half that size. How much would I use?
You'd need 4 cups of flour and 2 eggs.
That's right. You boys use it in the shop when you read a blueprint. As you know, a blueprint's merely a scale drawing of something that's usually larger. Suppose I had a blueprint of a bridge that's going to be 100 feet wide. But on this drawing, the bridge is only 10 inches wide. Now, how many feet would each inch represent?
10 feet.
That's right. Now, that's in ratio. Now, let's see where we made our mistakes. The problem was this. What is the ratio between 4.5 yards and 1.5 feet? Now, you looked hurriedly at 4.5 and 1.5, said the answer was 3. Well, that's where you fell into a trap. What you forgot was that before you can divide, you have to reduce all units of measurement to the same unit. Now, what's the unit here?
Feet?
That's right.
By golly, I sure fell for that one.
First of all, let's change 4.5 yards into feet. That gives us 13.5 feet. And now we can divide 13.5 feet by 1.5 feet. The right answer is 9.
Wow, I see where I made my mistake.
Now, I want you to look over your papers very carefully and see where you made your mistakes. I'll come down the aisles, and if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Yes?
No, from Dr. Williams.
All right, thank you. I have to leave for a few moments. On page 15 of your books, the first 3 problems are exactly like number 1 on the test. Suppose you do as many as you can until I get back.
I get the idea now. I sure messed up my test paper.
I'm glad he's going over these questions. I'd never make head or tail out of them otherwise.
You know, I'm beginning to get some sense out of this.
I hope I do better next time. I'd hate to bring another paper like this home.
The way he explains it, it doesn't seem too hard.
Oh, come on, cut it out. I want to do these problems.
Oh, let's have some fun while Mr. Grimes is out. Who wants to do these old problems anyway?
Now, you know where that border exit belongs. That's right, put it there.
Grimes sure caught him in the act.
Oh, Grimes is a pretty good egg.
That's more like it. Now you're getting it. Let's see if you can do the next one.
Classroom control and learning efficiency are products of good teaching. Learning must be made meaningful. Interest in work for which learners see a purpose provides its own discipline. But in spite of interest and meaning, it must be remembered that some incidents will occur. Skill in handling such occurrences prevent their growth into problems.
Oh, that's a pretty good catch. For a moment, I thought you'd miss.
I'm sorry, but I owed him the apple.
Well, I guess a fellow's expected to pay his debts. I'd suggest, though, in the future you do your baseball practicing outside of class.
A friendly attitude with a sprinkling of humor goes a long way toward winning the regard and cooperation of the class. For respect is a more desirable molder of behavior than fear.